It's hard to believe now, given the transcendent popularity of both the NBA and the NCAA's annual March Madness tournament, that basketball was once something of an afterthought for sports fans. As the 1980s dawned, the NBA, just over 3 decades removed from its founding, was flatlining. The recent merger with the American Basketball Association hadn't sparked interest like the owners had hoped, and with a dearth of star players to help market the league, attendance and television ratings were plummeting. Meanwhile, the NCAA tournament, which was played for the first time in 1939, was to that point a relatively niche event that failed to consistently generate national attention. Basketball desperately needed something, a bit of magic to capture the imagination of sports fans. Well, it got magic. Bird, too. On a March evening in Utah in 1979, basketball was transformed forever when 2 future titans, one a sharpshooting, soft-spoken kid from small-town Indiana, the other an exuberant, gregarious, position-defying phenom from industrial Michigan, clashed in the finals of the NCAA tournament. This fortuitous meeting not only shaped the greatest individual rivalry in the history of the sport, but elevated March Madness into the behemoth it is today, while setting the stage for the NBA to become a cultural powerhouse. More than 4 decades removed from their fateful showdown in the 1979 NCAA Championship game, it's easy to forget that the Larry Bird-Magic Johnson rivalry almost didn't happen. Bird, an absurdly gifted shooter from French Lick, Indiana, could have already been an up-and-coming NBA star by the spring of 1979. Owing to his stop-and-start collegiate career and the NBA's loophole-laden draft rules, Bird became eligible for the NBA draft in 1978, even though he had another year of college eligibility left. For that reason, a handful of teams, including his hometown Indiana Pacers, passed on him in the '78 draft, knowing that he intended to return to Indiana State for his final season. But the Boston Celtics, under the shrewd leadership of Red Auerbach, decided to roll the dice and selected Bird with the 6th overall pick. Bird could have gone pro then and there, and his storied rivalry with Magic Johnson? Well, who knows what would have happened. Instead, though, Bird stayed true to his word and returned to Indiana State for his senior year, setting into motion one of the most memorable and transformative seasons of basketball ever. As a senior, Bird was virtually unstoppable, averaging 28.8 points, 14.9 rebounds, and 5.5 assists per game for the Sycamores, whose soon-to-go pro superstar had turned them into a powerhouse. With the eventual College Player of the Year leading the charge, Indiana State, an unheralded school from the unheralded Missouri Valley Conference, went a perfect 29-0 during the regular season, en route to their first ever Division I NCAA tournament berth. Suddenly, with this recently drafted phenom turning some little-known school into the best team in the country, people were starting to pay attention to college basketball. But Bird wasn't the only phenomenon in the NCAA that had sports fans enraptured in 1979. About 350 miles northeast of Indiana, in East Lansing, Michigan, an effervescent, revolutionary young talent by the name of Irvin Johnson was generating national attention himself at his hometown school, Michigan State. They called him Magic, a nickname bestowed upon him in high school, and anyone who watched him play immediately saw why. At 6'9" and 215 pounds, Magic's size belied his elite ball handling skills, playmaking abilities, and shooting prowess, and instead of playing the 4 or 5 for the Spartans, Magic was running point. He was single-handedly dismantling the conception of the big man and redefining it in his image, and Magic, with his infectious charisma and larger-than-life personality, was becoming a bona fide star in the process. When Magic arrived at Michigan State, which he opted to attend in part because they allowed him to play point guard, the Spartans hadn't made the NCAA tournament in nearly 2 decades. Johnson promptly ended that drought, though, guiding Michigan State back to the dance as a freshman, where they reached the 3rd round. Then, in '79, Magic piloted an even better Spartans team to a number 3 end-of-season AP ranking and another tournament berth.
And the name of the game is to keep the ball in Magic's hands.
Oh, Magic got away from Tracy Jackson.
Over the course of the Spartans' 21-6 regular season, Magic averaged 16.3 points, 8.1 assists, and 7 rebounds per game, a jaw-dropping campaign that earned him a spot on the consensus All-American team. Thanks to Magic and the hick from French Lick, two electrifying talents with notably juxtaposing playing styles and personalities, college basketball was thrust to a new level of cultural relevance. By the time March rolled around, everyone was praying that fate would allow them to meet in the finals of the tournament, which had just been expanded to 40 teams. Fate did. Indiana State and Michigan State both breezed through their early round matchups, as expected, with Johnson in particular shining early on, including a triple-double in the Spartans tournament opener against Lamar University. Indiana State nearly met its match in the Elite Eight, where they squared off against 5th-ranked Arkansas, but Bird refused to go home, dropping a game-high 31 points to push his team to a 73-71 victory. The Sycamores were on to the Final Four, as were the Spartans, who dispatched of Notre Dame in the Elite Eight, and the anticipation that had been building all tournament long officially turned up to 11. With Bird and Magic each one win away from the most highly anticipated finals matchup in tournament history, the media presence for the 1979 Final Four was roughly double what it had been for previous semifinals, according to then Spartans head coach Judd Heathcote. But while Michigan State punched its ticket into the championship game rather effortlessly, demolishing Penn 101-67 in their semifinal, the Sycamores didn't have such an easy time against DePaul. Once again, though, Bird put Indiana State on his back and willed the undefeated Sycamores to victory, dropping 35 points on a ridiculous 84% shooting to secure a narrow 76-74 win. It was happening. College basketball's two biggest stars were finally going to square off for the first time and with a national championship on the line.
Perhaps we've never seen a final game with two greater individual players than Larry Bird, the Player of the Year from Indiana State, and the Magic Man from East Lansing, Irvin Johnson.
Never before had a basketball game so thoroughly captivated America. When the Spartans and Sycamores took the floor in Utah, roughly 35 million viewers were tuned in, a 32% bump from the previous year's championship game, good for a Nielsen rating of 24.1. It was, and remains, the most watched college basketball game in history. And, ironically enough, it was actually a bit of a letdown. The Spartans stormed ahead early, took a 9-point lead into halftime, and never looked back. Bird was flummoxed by Michigan State's zone defense, going just 7 for 21 from the field, while Magic picked apart the Sycamores, finishing with a game-high 24 points while adding 7 rebounds and 5 assists.
And here goes Johnson, and the foul is on number 30 of Indiana State, Bob Heaton. He can't believe it.
For the first time that season, Bird and Indiana State walked off the floor as losers. And for the first time ever, the Spartans were national champions. Naturally, Magic was named MVP of the Final Four. Yet, as anticlimactic as their championship showdown may have been, the die had still been cast in a variety of ways. For starters, the Bird-Magic finals matchup and the buzz they generated throughout the preceding rounds turned the NCAA tournament into a cultural phenomenon. Those two effectively put the madness into March Madness, forever altering the scope and scale of the tournament, which has since become one of the most popular sporting events in the world. Consider this. In 1980, 1 year after those two stole the show, not only did the tournament expand from 40 teams to 48 teams, but the NCAA received $8.8 million from NBC for the tournament's broadcasting rights, nearly double what they'd gotten the year prior. By 1982, as more fans became hooked on the delicious drama of March Madness, and the practice of filling out a bracket became more and more ubiquitous, the NCAA had negotiated a new rights deal with CBS that paid them $16 million per year. 40 years later, the NCAA receives nearly $900 million a year for the now 68-team tournament's broadcasting rights, to say nothing of the gobs of money they generate from their other corporate sponsors, and just about everybody with a pulse fills out a bracket come March. The NCAA can thank Magic and Larry Legend for that. And the NBA is similarly indebted to those two, who helped facilitate a renaissance for the floundering association following their showdown in Salt Lake City. A few months after the NCAA finals, Bird agreed to a 5-year, $3.25 million contract with the Celtics, who were less than 3 weeks away from potentially watching him re-enter the NBA draft and losing his exclusive signing rights. And with Bird off the board, the formidable Los Angeles Lakers, who had gone to the conference semifinals that year but had serendipitously traded for the New Orleans Jazz's first-round pick, didn't have to think twice about who they were taking first overall: Magic. Suffice it to say, the infusion of two already recognizable franchise cornerstone level stars with an already established rivalry just waiting to be revisited helped reignite the league. Without Magic and Bird, the NBA might still be showing playoff games and even finals games on tape delay, which was a common practice when the two broke into the league. As everyone eventually realized though, the dominance of Bird and Magic, who turned their respective big market franchises into dynasties, was too compelling not to watch live, no matter where you lived. Bird took home the Rookie of the Year award in 1979-1980, carrying the Celtics to the Eastern Conference Finals a season after they had finished 29-53. Meanwhile, Magic, paired up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in LA, put up a similarly brilliant rookie campaign, averaging 18 points with roughly 8 rebounds and 7 assists per game for the Showtime Lakers, who finished 60-22 and bullied their way to their first NBA championship in nearly a decade. Famously, in Game 6 of the Finals against the 76ers, Magic started at center and ultimately played all 5 positions, heralding the future of positionless basketball that we're currently living through. He also took home Finals MVP over Abdul-Jabbar. Not to be outdone, Bird responded in kind the following year, averaging a double-double per game for a second straight season while upping his assist rate, and ultimately, with the help of future Hall of Famers Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish, propelling Boston to a championship over the Houston Rockets. 2 years into their careers, Magic and Bird each had a championship ring, and just like in 1979, the narrative of two dueling titans, one black, one white, one loquacious, one reserved, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, was irresistible, even when they weren't directly squaring off against each other. When Magic and the Lakers returned to the finals in 1982, where they ultimately defeated the 76ers again in 6 games, the Nielsen ratings for the series were at their highest level since they started tracking in 1974. Magic, by the way, took home Finals MVP honors again, nearly averaging a triple-double per game. Suddenly, the NBA's popularity was soaring. And right on cue, just as the league was flirting with a major cultural takeover, Bird's Celtics and Magic's Lakers squared off in the 1984 NBA Finals, expediting the league's ascent. Unlike the 1979 NCAA Finals, however, this Bird-Magic showdown lived up to the hype, and then some. Naturally, the series went 7 games and produced several iconic performances, none more so than Bird's 34-point, 17-rebound showing in a sweltering Game 5 victory at the non-air-conditioned Boston Garden. Tensions ran high all series long and famously boiled over in Game 6 when Lakers forward James Worthy shoved Celtics star Cedric Maxwell from behind while he was mid-layup, sending him flying into the basket support.
2-on-1 Boston. Maxwell is pushed and knocked away by Worthy. And Maxwell doesn't like it.
And after the game, a series-tying Lakers victory, an LA fan threw a beer at Celtics guard ML Carr, who then characterized the series as an all-out war. In the end though, it was Boston and Bird that won the war, as the Celtics downed the Lakers 111-102 in Game 7 to secure the championship.
Cooper goes for 3. It's over.
A moment of sweet revenge for Bird, the Finals MVP, who had slumped off the floor as Magic celebrated his NCAA Finals title years prior. Not surprisingly, the '84 showdown had people glued to their TVs like never before, and Game 7, with its 19.3 Nielsen rating, remains among the most watched games in NBA history. And when Magic and Bird tussled in the finals again the following year, a season that also marked the pro debut of a promising UNC product by the name of Michael Jordan, the ratings and share were even higher. Ultimately, the Lakers got their revenge, besting the Celtics in 6 games in a rather ho-hum series that featured only 1 game with a margin of victory of less than 7 points. In 1986, which saw Bird and the Celtics grab another title, again over the Houston Rockets, the NBA broadcast the playoff game on tape delay for the final time. So, when Bird and Magic met in the 1987 Finals for the 3rd and final time, all 24 million viewers, who made that series the most watched non-Michael Jordan Finals in NBA history, were watching live as Magic tormented the Celtics to the tune of roughly 26 points, 13 assists, and 8 rebounds per game. His baby skyhook with time winding down in Game 4 epitomized just how unstoppable he was. And sure enough, the Lakers emerged as champions once again, winning in 6 games. You can guess who was named Finals MVP. From that point onward, even though the last meaningful chapter of the Bird-Magic rivalry had already been penned, the NBA was like a runaway train. By 1990, the NBA was earning $150 million a year for their broadcasting rights, an increase of roughly 650% from what their broadcasting rights had landed them back in 1979. And thanks to the groundwork laid by those two, and of course the incomparable brilliance of Michael Jordan that followed their primes, the NBA has only continued to grow. Today, the NBA is among the most popular sports leagues in the world, a supremely well-marketed, star-laden, social media-savvy league, earning more than $2.6 billion per year in media rights fees alone. It's hard to imagine the NBA would be the behemoth that it is, though, without Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, two legends whose chance encounter as starry-eyed amateurs back in 1979 changed the game forever. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button.